Thank you for listening to the Writers Guild of Alberta podcasts. The following episode was recorded in 2020 as part of the WGA's online reading series, sponsored by the Rosé Foundation. The audio quality may differ from recording to recording. We want to thank the authors and hosts for their permission to share these audio-only episodes with you, and thank the Rosé Foundation again for their generous support.
We're live. Welcome. Welcome, YouTube viewers, writers, readers, friends, family, pets, girlfriends, boyfriends, and spouses. Note to our viewers, if you want to take part in the Q&A section following our reading, you'll need to sign into the YouTube app to do that. You can write your questions in the chat window on the side throughout, and I'll address them in our Q&A section after our reading and discussion. I'd like to thank the Writers Guild of Alberta for making this possible. Thank you especially to the Rosé Foundation for providing the funding for these Writers Guild Reader Series. It's much appreciated. Most of all, thank you to Lori Hahnel for being here with her new short story collection, Vermin. All right, so let's see who Lori is. I'm sure all of you know who she is, but in case you don't, I'll tell you. Lori Hahnel is a renowned Alberta author. Her novels include Love Minus Zero and After You've Gone. She's written 2 short story collections, Nothing Sacred, which was shortlisted for the Alberta Literary Awards, and this latest, Vermin Stories. Her work has appeared widely in journals, including The Fiddlehead, Joyland, and the Saturday Evening Post, and has been broadcast on CBC Radio. She's currently serving as Calgary Public Library's 2020 Author in Residence. So if you have burning stories that you want Lori to look at, contact the Calgary Public Library and make an appointment to chat with her. You won't regret it. And here now is writer extraordinaire Lori Hahnel reading from her story, Vermin.
Well, thank you, my editor extraordinaire, Lee Kvern. And I wanted to say thank you to everybody who has come out tonight to join us in our chat. It will be wonderful to see you, except I can't see you, but I appreciate the thought. So we're going to start out with a reading of the story Vermin, the title story from the collection. I'm going to read the whole story this time, so bear with me. And here we go, Vermin. Jürgen Koch has to be the worst cook in the world. So you wonder why he owns a restaurant and why he cooks in it. It's simple. He owns the restaurant because it was an easy business for him to buy in Tofino. When he came here on vacation in the 90s and did the West Coast Trail, he fell in love with Vancouver Island and spent the next 10 years saving up so he could move here from Germany. And he does the cooking himself because he's a cheap son of a bitch who won't pay a real cook. I'd love to tell my impatient customer this, but I can't. I love living in Tofino too, and I don't want to lose this job. Suck it up, sweetheart, I think. You don't look like you're starving to me. Actually, this guy scared the bejesus out of me when he first came in. He looks a lot like my ex-boyfriend Ray's Uncle Lloyd. Dead ringer for him. He spooked me enough that I wanted Dirk to serve his table, but of course Dirk was nowhere in sight. Probably out back, having a cigarette, listening to that techno dance stuff he loves on his iPod. I had to reason with myself, how could it be Lloyd? Lots of old men look like that. Short, leathery-faced, truck logo baseball cap, faded jeans held up around his skinny ass with a giant belt buckle. Once I went over and took his order and heard his voice, I realized he wasn't Lloyd, couldn't be. What was I thinking? Becca, Jürgen calls from the kitchen. He's so cheap he can't even spring for one of those counterbells to ring when he finally has an order up. I'll have to get him one for his birthday. The pale, hard, half hot dog bun Jürgen has toasted and smeared thinly with garlic butter rattles lonely and ungarnished on the oval plate as I set it in front of the man. Yes, this is what he's been waiting for all this time. He looks at me, about to say something, about to complain. I head him off at the pass. You ordered the garlic toast, didn't you? I ask, flash a flirtatious smile, flick the ends of my long, dark hair over my tanned shoulders. He flushes a little, glances at his tired-looking wife. A girl my age probably hasn't smiled at this guy since he was my age. Yeah, he says quickly, thanks. Another satisfied customer. Another disaster averted by my exceptional public service skills. I'll have to talk to Jürgen about a raise. Ha. One of the things I love most about this place is the ocean smell. Southern Alberta smells like cow shit and diesel and sour gas wells. The ocean smells of life and death, of rot and salt. I like to walk up and down Long Beach, feel the sand between my toes, look for whatever's washed up today. Shells, crabs, dead seals or birds, tires, driftwood, bottles. You never know what you'll find, different stuff every day. Dirk and I surf a lot. On the west coast of the island, we get some of the best waves anywhere. Surfers come here from all over the world. He usually uses a board, but I prefer body surfing. I need to throw myself against the water, feel the impact of my body against the waves. Is surfing addictive? I don't know. I do know that sometimes I only feel alive out here. Ray's uncle Lloyd lived on the section of land the family owned near Turner Valley in the rolling foothills south of Calgary. At one time, the family ranched there, but by the time we moved there, it was only Lloyd left. I wasn't ever sure what he did. The yard in front of his house was full of cars and trucks that he worked on some of the time. Mostly, I just saw him sit on the porch and drink beer and watch the cars that went by once in a while. Over the years, the family built different houses on the land and eventually abandoned them as they built new ones. Ray and I lived in the oldest house, on the other side of the barn near Lloyd's house. Lloyd must have seen the people coming and going day and night. Ray didn't think his uncle had any idea what he did. I wasn't so sure. Becca, Lloyd said, and grasped my hand a little too firmly, a little too long when Ray introduced us. That short for Rebecca? Yes, it is, I said, smiled tightly. No shit, Sherlock, and you can let go of my hand now. Lloyd didn't like Ray's dog, Junior. Junior scared the shit out of me the first time I saw him, too. He's a Rottweiler cross, and crossed with a moose, I think. He's black and tan, muscular, huge. Luckily, Junior loved me from the second we met. He came and lay at my feet, and I rubbed his tummy, and that was it. He was devoted to me from then on, followed me everywhere. I'd never had a dog before, had no idea how loyal they can be. It's kind of cool. Ray decided we should move out to the family's land after a friend of his got busted in Calgary. Don't get the wrong idea about Ray. He didn't always sell dope, at least not full-time. He impressed me when I first met him. He worked as a roofer, made good money. He talked about going back to school part-time, picking up some courses, starting a business. I liked that he had a plan. But after he hurt his back on a job, he put in a claim for compensation and waited, and when they did settle, he got almost nothing. Hey, a guy's got to live. Still, after a while, I realized my boyfriend had become a dealer. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. He always said it was temporary, but he'd been doing it almost a year, and I never noticed him looking for a job. Plus, once he started working at home, he let himself go. His construction worker's physique got all soft, he let his hair go all wild, and he got into some kind of freaky Fu Manchu thing with his mustache. The idea was to intimidate people, I guess. I just thought he looked like Lemmy from Motorhead. Ew. Worse, unless he was making a delivery, he hung around the place all the time. He started to remind me of Lloyd, maybe a cross between Lloyd and Lemmy. Creepy. What happened to all your plans? I asked him after a while. You know, going to school, starting your own business, all that. Well, I kind of have my own business now, don't I? Yeah, an illegal business. Come on, Becca, give me a break. You know it's just temporary. Is it? I don't see you looking into courses or anything like that, or looking for another job even. Get off my back, okay? As for me, I worked waiting tables evenings at a diner in Turner Valley. Got me out of the house, I guess. I would have rather done something else, but there wasn't much to pick from. Turner Valley's pretty small, and it was a great experience for working at Jürgen's Tofino house, as it turns out. Ray got up early one morning in June to go to Calgary to make a delivery to one of his better customers. I didn't feel like going with him since he had no air conditioning in his truck, and we were in the middle of a stretch of hot weather then. The days were sultry, overcast. Thunder rumbled in the rainy afternoons and evenings. I thought I'd get out early in the morning and take Junior for a walk while it was still reasonably cool. Besides, I didn't feel like hanging around with Ray's pothead friends. When Junior and I went by Lloyd's place, I saw him take something out from under the eaves of the old barn near his house and throw handfuls of it against the wall, hard. When I got closer, I could see that it was birds. He scooped baby birds out of nests that lined the eaves and threw them against the wall of the barn. Dead baby birds lay all along the bottom of the wall where he'd already been. Barn cats gorged themselves. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Sparrows, vermin. I'm getting rid of them." "You're throwing baby birds against a wall." I watched him shoo the cats away, fill a shovel with birds, throw them into a big slough swollen from the rains at the bottom of a slope behind the barn. "They're filthy, shit all over everything, damage the crops." "What crops? You're not growing anything." He squinted at me for a minute. "I don't need vermin on my property." Sparrows screeched as Junior and I walked away. Funny, I hadn't noticed them before, and now the sound was deafening. The sign outside Jurgen's Tofino house says "Best Fish and Chips on Vancouver Island." Of course, every restaurant on the island has a sign that says that. Some of them claim to have the best fish and chips in the world. Well, I wouldn't say we have the best fish and chips in the world or on the island. If it was up to me, the sign would say the food probably won't kill you, or maybe lunch usually doesn't take more than 2 hours, or something like that. It also says specializing in West Coast cuisine. Jurgen's interpretation of West Coast cuisine is a little, shall we say, loose. He relies heavily on frozen and processed ingredients and tends to shy away from local stuff because of the expense, of course. Dirk, loyal son that he is, claims his dad's cooking has improved in the 10 years he's been here. I shudder to think that what he does now is the result of 10 years' work. Dirk and I have an understanding. He helps me out if I have a customer who's a little too friendly or a little too aggressive. I help him out if he has trouble with English. Not that he needs it that often. He's only been here about a year and he's got an accent for sure, but he speaks English well. I always think about how I'd do in German. Not well, I think. I'd like to meet Dirk's mom someday. He must get his tall, slim, blonde looks from her. Jurgen always looks a little like a walrus to me. Pudgy, big handlebar mustache, not blonde or red or brown, but somewhere in between. It's one of those mustaches some guys grow when they're losing it on top. Dirk's mom's name is Petra. She's an artist, lives in Berlin, works in a gallery. She and Jurgen divorced long ago. I'm thinking it won't be long until Dirk takes off for Vancouver. Not that a gay man would have a problem living in Tofino, but I think a gay man living with Jurgen could have a problem, which is why it's so convenient that we can hang out together. Jurgen thinks we're in love. It doesn't bother me, but maybe someday Jurgen will figure it out, and I don't want to be around for that. I have to say, it didn't really surprise me when Ray got busted. I wondered if someone had narked on him. A pissed off customer maybe, or even Lloyd. I had a bad feeling about Ray's court date. Didn't think it would go well for him, especially after he told me this wasn't his first offense. Yeah, I had a prior conviction about 5 years ago. I swear though, I just had a bag for personal use, just an ounce. Why didn't you tell me that before? I didn't think it was important until now. My parents didn't ever like Ray. They'd have flipped if they'd known he was in jail for trafficking. I thought at first I'd tell them he was away, traveling, in Europe for 3 to 5. Then again, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like that was my cue. The end, time to go. I decided I'd head out to Vancouver Island for a while. I'd always wanted to live by the sea. So I bought a bus ticket. Ray's sister Julie, who lives in Turner Valley, agreed to come by that day to take me to the Greyhound station in Calgary. She was also taking Junior to stay with her, said she'd keep him until Ray got out of jail. As I finished packing, Lloyd came by. It all seemed to happen so fast. I thought about it thousands of times, and after a certain point, I'm not sure what happened exactly. It was another hot, humid day, and I took Junior out for a walk, our last walk, before it got too hot. Even before we got back to the house, black clouds rolled in. The temperature dropped a few degrees. There was a big storm on the way. You could feel it in the air. Just as we got in the house, big cold raindrops started to fall, hard and fast. I was about to change my sweat-damp clothes when I saw Lloyd standing in the kitchen, grinning. His green plaid shirt was stained, a film of sweat and a two-day beard covered his leathery face. "What are you doing here, Lloyd?" He dangled a key in front of my face. "Lots of keys to this place around. I got a few." "I didn't ask you how you got in. I asked what you were doing here." He just smiled. "You miss Ray?" "Sure, but it's time for me to move on. I'm leaving." He should have been more careful. He shouldn't have been selling drugs on the family farm. Guess he thought I didn't know, but I did. "So you called the cops?" "I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is he should have watched his step. Now he's losing a pretty girl like you. The boy's always been a fool." A flash of lightning illuminated the windows for a moment, and the tearing roar came close behind. Lloyd ignored it, slowly made his way toward me. "You need to go back to your place now," I said. He kept coming closer. "You wouldn't make me go out in the storm, would you?" He wrapped a hand around my forearm. The more I tried to pull away, the harder he hung on. Black grease stained all the creases in his hands and around and under his thick yellow fingernails. I smelled his sweat, the alcohol on his breath, his grimy clothes. "Junior," I called quietly. I immediately heard the click of his claws on the floor behind me. I looked into Lloyd's eyes for a second before I said, "Get him, Junior." As soon as Junior growled and started to lunge, Lloyd was off like a greasy little rocket, out the front door and heading in the direction of the barn. I didn't think he could move that fast. He wasn't fast enough for Junior, though. I watched at the front door as the dog caught up with him. Junior's jaws caught him by the back of his upper thigh, pulled him to the wet, slippery ground. Lloyd screamed, "Call him off! Call him off!" He screamed like a girl. I had no respect for that. Lloyd screeched as he and Junior rolled down a slope, and then I couldn't see them anymore. I heard a splash, so I guess they got into the slough. I pictured Lloyd thrashing among the bloated corpses of baby birds. Then thunder drowned out any other sound for a while. I started to wonder whether I should go outside and see what happened when Junior appeared in the doorway, soaked to the skin and panting hard. "Poor Junior, poor baby, you're all wet. Let Becca dry you off." I got a towel and rubbed him down. I didn't see any scratches or any blood on his fur, which would have maybe washed off in the slough and the rain. There was something that looked like a long shred of cloth stuck in his teeth, green plaid. I pulled it out and threw it in the compost outside. Junior had a drink of water and stretched out on the kitchen floor for a nap. Poor guy was exhausted. He'd had a busy morning. But when I woke him a little over an hour later so we could get into Julie's truck, he was fresh and ready to go. Dogs are funny like that. The sea looks like the sky, looks like the sea. Gulls screech as they circle overhead, screech as they dive bomb the surf. I watch one dive in, dip, come out with a long shred of cloth stuck in its beak. But when I look again, it's just a piece of kelp. Silly me. Dirk and I are both working our usual 11 to 8 shifts today. We'll have to get moving pretty soon. But right now, we lie side by side, dry out in the sun on Long Beach, listen to the birds warm up after surfing all morning. Today, I feel like I could lie here forever. I don't want to go into work, don't want to deal with Jürgen, deal with the customers. "I'm thinking about moving to Vancouver, Becca," Dirk says. "You'd love it there. It's a very cool city." "You want to come with?" "Maybe. When are you thinking of going?" "Soon, pretty soon." Can I think about it for a couple of days? Of course, take your time. Thanks. I'm not surprised, you're from a big city. You must miss big city life. I do, yes. What about you? Do you miss Alberta? I think about that for a minute before I answer him. A little, sometimes. I don't miss much about Alberta, really, except for maybe Junior. And that's the end of the story. Yay.
Awesome. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. What a rare treat to actually hear a full short story from a
It's
writer.
true. It's true. You don't usually get that chance. So there you are.
don't. Yeah, that's a real treat. Thank you, Laurie. That was awesome.
Oh,
So
my pleasure.
let's talk about this book. So as Laurie said at the beginning, I was editor on this book. I've been editing for our publisher that we both share for a couple years. And they asked me if I wanted to edit a short story collection. And I said, sure, because I'd done short story collections in the past. And they sent me the book, and lo and behold, it was Laurie's. And that it was odd because I mean, Laurie and we're not just writers in the community, we're also friends. We read each other's work. We've been friends for a decade. And so the idea of editing someone close to me was daunting. And I almost thought I was going to turn it down. And then I started looking at the collection and realizing that Laurie had published, I mean, how many stories are in there? About 16? I can't
16,
remember.
I think. Somebody asked me that last time and I had no idea because we started out with 22 and we cut several out. So I think 16, 17 sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and pretty much all of those had been published in literary magazines or in, online or wherever. So I mean, the idea of editing you was minimal on my part. I mean, the stories were so polished, and so it was just a real treat to work with you, and not how I thought it would be. One of the decisions I wasn't involved in, and I'm curious on your part, Laurie, is Vermin is the title story of your short story collection. And why this particular story? And did the publisher weigh in on that decision, or was that yours alone as the writer?
That was my decision. And when I sent the manuscript to them last fall, that was the title I had chosen, based obviously on that story. I chose that as the title because I feel like Vermin is probably the strongest story, or one of the strongest stories in the collection. And more than that, I felt like that simple one-word title was intriguing. It's a provocative word. And, as it turns out, I think it also lends itself fairly well to, a graphic treatment. I think it's quite an arresting word in terms of the cover design. So, I mean, I wasn't really thinking about that part of it when I chose that as the title, but I just thought it's a striking word. It's going to make people go, well, what the heck is that all about, right? And I hope it has that effect.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's that's why I was curious about, how you came to that decision, because it is such a succinct word, and it just, I mean, visually it's perfect on the book. It just, I would look at that book in a bookstore. That would be one of the books I'd be drawn towards.
I might wonder what it was about, but it does say stories in the corner, so that's good, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would argue with you that yes, Vermin is a strong story, but you have many strong stories in this short story collection.
Oh, well.
Seriously though, I mean, I know from my own short story collection, I've got some weak ones. Yours is very solid. Like from an editor standpoint, you were just a dream to work with.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously though, I mean, the editing, and anytime we discuss things or talked about things, you were so open to suggestions or questions if I had questions, and that was a real treat. I mean, sometimes you act as an editor and people don't want to change anything, and it's yeah, you kind of wonder what you're doing there, but I didn't feel that way with you at all. I'm curious, how was it for you having a friend edit your book?
Well, so I think that I told you and Barb Howard and Betty Jane Hegarett the news of, the acceptance of the short story collection pretty shortly after I found out. And we were kidding around, and I said, "Oh, maybe you'll be my editor." And I didn't really think that would happen. But I was happy when I found out. But I also thought, well, what is she going to be like to work with as an editor? And one thing I thought that I was totally wrong about, but I did think I'm probably going to have a lot of work to do, because you're like, we're friends, we're colleagues, but I think that our writing styles are quite different. As you would expect two different people to have different writing styles. I find that your work is very visual, and it's very it's very image rich. My work is not like that. It's not quite as you tend to focus in on something and give us like the whole picture unfolds of this thing. I always think of your stuff as kind of being like a mosaic. You've got all these little images that sort of build a picture, and I don't have that much imagery, so I thought she's going to make me put all this imagery and she's going to make me write the way she writes. But that was wrong. That was totally wrong. You were great to work with. You were very responsive to any questions or concerns that I had, and I liked the way that you parceled out the work. You didn't just send me this big plop, a big manuscript with a bunch of red lines and stuff on it. Like, I got one story at a time, and we worked on them in little chunks, and it worked really well for me. So it was delightful to work with you. I would work with you again in a second.
Well, conversely, can you be my editor on my next book, Lori?
Oh, yeah.
I like your description.
Get this in writing. Let's get this in writing. Come on.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, no, I really respected our differences. I mean, your writing has such a voice and a nuance. And what I particularly love about this short story collection is they're all female narrators, I think, right? Yeah, they're all female.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, which is awesome, especially in this day and age, just to have, females representative in every story in different ways. And what I liked in particular about your writing is how you link your narrators to music in some way, not necessarily in Vermin, in the title story, but all the other stories. There's a link between the narrators and the music of the time, or the narrator is a lover of an historical musical figure. Can you talk about that and what your interest is? And
yeah, that's very true. I mean, almost all of these stories have some connection with music in one degree or another, but several of them are actually about real life musicians. And there's also one about a real life artist, Tom Thompson. And all of these stories that involve real life figures, I have chosen to tell them from the point of view of the wife or girlfriend of one of these real life people. And, on reflection, all of these people, all of the artists or musicians that I've written about are people who died young. And I think what I'm really interested in is, what was the impact on the women in their lives after losing their partner at such a young age. And again, thinking about this earlier today, I thought, well, what is it about that scenario that fascinates me or kind of obsesses me? I wonder if it goes back, this is going to sound silly, but I kind of wonder if it goes back to John Lennon. When he died, I was a big fan. Like, I was a huge fan, and I found that to be a devastating, depressing experience. So, I wonder maybe somehow if I'm exploring that because, my mind started in that direction, like when I was 17, when he died. Could be, I'm not sure. But anyway, I like to think about, well, what was life like for these women, when they lost these men? I think for most of them, it was pretty devastating.
yeah, and what's so fresh about that too, Laurie, is that, especially in the historical sense where you're working with a musician that's no longer alive. It's always about the musician. It's never from the point of view of their female lovers or their spouses. And that was really lovely about the collection, and how that impacted their lives as they moved on from those, people that had died early on. I mean, yeah, it's really fresh, and I love that. I love that when I was editing it, because it was not something I'd read before, because it's always, you read about Tom Thompson, it's about him. It's a bio, it's a story. Or you read about Bix Beiderbecke. Am I pronouncing that?
Yep, you got it. You nailed it. Big
Did
spider.
I? Woo!
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
awesome,
Nice
awesome.
one.
Who I wasn't familiar with, and looked him up, and as I read the story, then knowing, who he was, it was lovely. And then you have Chopin's lover. I mean, all of it. I love the theme that runs through it, but I love that it's from the women's perspective. That to me was just really wonderful to work with you on that. And I had very little to say about it. You were a master on the page.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Lee. I'm really glad that aspect of the collection appeals to you. Sometimes I felt, while I was looking for a home for this book, like maybe those historical stories were a liability. But,
Mm-mm.
I'm hearing not on that one. I think that people are enjoying the historical stories quite a bit.
Oh yeah. In fact, when the publisher and I were talking back and forth, they chose that book based on those historical stories and figures, which I thought was awesome.
I think that's awesome too.
Yeah, yeah. So no, that's good. Okay, what else? What else do we want to talk about, Laurie? Um,
Let's
I've got
see.
some questions here. I have a question from and by the way, everybody out there, if you have questions, please go to the chat and type them in. Otherwise, Laurie and I are going to blather on endlessly, and you'll be sick of
You'll
us.
regret it if we keep blabbering.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly. So ask Laurie really tough questions too.
No.
Really put her on the spot. Make her think.
No, I'm tired of thinking.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. We have a question from Sean Hunter, who asks, how do you go about choosing the order of short stories in a collection? And we can both talk about this. Laurie, you talk about it first.
Well, I just let Lee do that. No. We worked on it together. We worked on the order together, and we talked about, which pieces we thought were the strongest and where should they go in the collection based on, how strong they were. And generally, I think that you want to start strong, right, and end strong. So we did that for sure. And then it was a question of, I don't know, kind of ranking them. Did we kind of rank them a little bit in terms of strongness and then decide where they should go? Or maybe it was a less mathematical process.
I don't
than
think we were
that.
quite that mean about ranking your stories, Laurie.
I don't know. It was so long ago. It was months ago. But I mean, yeah, you want to have a strong story at the beginning, a strong one at the end,
Yeah.
right? And yep, and all the crappy ones in between, right?
Well, crappy is not the right word. I would say you want, yeah, definitely you want to start strong, you want to end strong, and how the middle of the book goes. It seemed to me that we talked about kind of going between the current stories told in the present, and then historical, and kind of
Yes.
flipping, so that
Yes,
there was diversity and variety, and you didn't have to read in any particular order, that you could just basically pick up the book and open to a story and go from there. So, and again, I mean, you had it well laid out by the time I got to the manuscript, because so many of the stories had been previously published. It was really, really easy to do that.
Although it was really helpful, I think it was your suggestion of not having the historical stories all in a row. Like, we did try to mix them up a bit, just so, I think partly so that people wouldn't get the idea when they started reading it that it was a book of historical fiction, because I mean, although it contains some historical fiction, it's not all historical fiction, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the same as, any, when you structure a story, that you want to set up your structure ahead of time so your reader knows what to expect. And yeah, for the story collection and the diversity in the stories, I think the order that we chose to put them in shows that, right? That, you're going to be current, and then you're going to be back in the 18th century, and then, back to present day, and yeah,
It's a roller coaster,
it's a
right?
roller coaster. Yeah, no, I thought it worked really well.
I think so too. Yeah.
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 Okay, I've got some comments from people, and I'll read them out so that everybody that isn't signed in can see them. Ellie Bryan says, "Great reading, Lori. Fantastic story."
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Heidi Klassen says, "Great story, Lori. It reminded me of my old Roddy
Excellent.
Jr." Um, Cindy Morris. Here, the voice of reason. 20 stories. Cindy.
Thank
Cindy
you
is
for
in
counting.
possession of the book. She picked it up today. She says now she'll be able to read it through hearing Lori's voice.
Aw.
That I was talking to my Zoom class today. We're doing a short story course, and we were talking about the difference between hearing a writer read their story. It's so much about the tone. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of humor in Vermin in particular, and I've not heard you read that live. There's a lot of humor, sort of, yeah, it's kind of ironic or
And
sardonic,
it's in the
right?
character's voice. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily in what she says, but it's in how she says it, right?
Yeah, and the tone with which you read it. And I didn't necessarily pick up on that when I was reading it, right? So I love hearing a reader
Oh,
or a writer read something live just to get those tones, right?
it makes such a huge difference. And I mean, there's only so much you can do with punctuation and italics and that kind of thing to try and, put a bit of inflection into the voice. I mean, the rest of it, it's up to the reader's imagination. And it's not always exactly what you as the writer, well, I guess, how do you know what people imagine? But, what you as the writer intend doesn't always come out on the page in terms
Yeah.
of tone, I guess, is what I mean.
For sure. And in particular, humor, I think, is particularly difficult to get across on the page, right? And especially if it's
tricky.
kind of nuanced humor, or as you say, it's the, that kind of sardonic voice of the character.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, yeah. So that's great. Okay. Kathy Seifert says, super interesting discussion about different writing styles. Thank you,
Awesome.
Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Yes. Ellie Bryant says, you published 2 novels and 2 short story collections. Does your process or approach to writing change when writing short fiction versus novel? Ooh, good, tough question, Ellie.
That's a good, tough question. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's killer. I mean, the way my books have been published, it's been novel, short story collection, novel, short story collection, but that's not really the order in which they've been written. Short stories are something that I will write in between phases of the novels that I'm working on. So, I might work on my first draft of a novel for a while and then stop and write a couple of short stories, and then go back and write some more on the first draft. So they are kind of things that I do in between phases of the novel. And it's not like I just do it because, it's something to do in between the parts of writing a novel. I enjoy writing short stories. But yeah, I mean, the order that these things have been published and don't really reflect the order that they've been written in. But having said that, oh yeah, there's a totally different process to writing a short story than there is to a novel. With a novel, you can expand everything quite a bit, and you can, engage in lots of description, and you can have lots and lots of characters. With a short story, you've got to focus everything a little bit more. Every word has to mean something significant. Everything has to be there for a reason. But I've never really written a short story collection, so I've written individual short stories, but I've never really sat down and said, I'm going to write a short story collection. It's just that I happen to have enough to kind of put together is how I approach it. And I know a lot of people don't approach it that way, but that is how I approach it. So that's the answer.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that, sitting down to actually set out to write a short story collection. That wouldn't be my process either.
Well, I think if people are writing like a linked story collection, they may have a little more, conscious structuring from the beginning. But yeah, I think neither of us have done that with our story collections.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about, I have, I want to tell everybody that Lori's book is available at Owl's Nest, Chapters, Indigo, anywhere you can buy a book. And I urge you in this time of COVID, please support the writers. God knows we need it. I mean, we're dying here, right?
We're
All
dying,
the artists,
dying.
all the artists are. We don't even have tequila tonight.
It's
We're drinking
horrible.
water and
Water.
Coca-Cola.
Look at that.
People,
Oh my
Coke,
God.
like just straight Coke. Like I'm so broke, right? So do think about supporting writers and supporting your local bookstores, especially during these times of COVID, because we can't be live and we can't have those same interactions that actually sell books for writers. So I'm kind of begging you, just please buy Lori's
Please.
book. And two, something that the publishers are kind of telling us as well. Keep in mind that with COVID, there's, the printers are working in limited ways, and so are the publishers because of social distancing, and there might be shortages. So buy the books now. They're there, like Owl's Nest. Call them up tomorrow. You can order stuff online. You can, yeah, do it. Definitely do it. Okay. So Jason has a question. I don't know if you're allowed to ask a question,
Come on,
Jason. What the
Jason,
heck?
really?
Did the publisher know that Lee and Lori were friends when they asked Lee to be the editor? Was that totally random?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know the answer?
They did not know we were friends. No, they knew we were both Alberta writers. They didn't know, if we traveled in, I think because I don't think it wasn't, again, until they sent me, I'd already agreed to do a short story collection, and they sent me your manuscript. And then, then I had a conversation with them and said, you know what, we're not just writers in the community, we're also friends. Does that matter to you? And they had, I mean, Great Plains is, it's two women that are running, three women that are actually running Great Plains, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful to work with.
So great to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was your experience too, right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
super receptive. Like if you email them, they get back to you within the day, which I love.
Right. Imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not waiting like a week, in between conversations and stuff. And that's kind of what I love about working with them is, and because we had conversations around that, me being Lori's friend, and were they concerned about it? And they weren't. They just asked me. They said, "Are you okay with it?" And again, once I started to look through the collection and just, realized how polished it was. They actually didn't need me, but don't tell them that, Lori. Don't tell them they didn't need me.
I won't.
But
I think they did need you. Yeah.
Well, no. It's good. Yeah. And Jason is also informing me that Owl's Nest, this is big, has signed copies.
They do. They do.
So you need signed copies for Christmas present, one for you and one for your mom or your aunt or your cousin.
Everyone in your bubble, right?
Yeah. Every person in your little cohort, which is only 6 of you, but yeah. Okay, so let's see. I don't see any more questions at the moment, so I have some little quick round questions for Lori, and I stole this from a Cambridge podcast.
No way.
I did.
Do I have to answer with an English accent?
That would be more authentic. Can you do that for us?
I can't. No, I can't. Sorry.
All right. How many books have you written to date?
5.5. Half. I'm not done the sixth one yet.
Wow. You are prolific. That's awesome.
I guess. But I mean, I've been around for 5.5 decades, so it's only fair.
There you go. You started writing when you were 10, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Ellie Bryan has already kind of touched on this. Short stories or novels, preference?
I can't pick both. It's like asking which is your favorite child, right? I can't decide.
You don't have a favorite child? But my boys aren't watching this. You're both my favorites, right, Lori? Both your
Exactly,
favorites.
exactly. That's
Exactly.
right.
Where do you write?
I write at home. It's a little different right now than it was before because I used to have an office at home, but now my husband is using it. So I'm writing in the dining room these days.
And do you have quiet to write in?
Mostly. It's not bad.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Coffee, tea, or something stronger while you write?
Coffee, please. Coffee, must have coffee. Yeah.
Nice. Do you write anything by hand?
Sometimes I do. If I have a scene that I feel like I'm not connecting with the visual part of it very well, or if it's like a lengthy passage of dialogue that isn't coming out the way I want it to, I will use pen and paper to do that. But no, otherwise it would just take me, 1,000 years to write a novel. So can't do it.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Planner or pantser?
I plan to pants.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that. I haven't heard that one.
Well, I've always been a pantser, so I kind of like plan to work with it. I pants for the first draft, and then I plan through the second draft. Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that's a solid process. Get it down
To
first
work.
and then see what you have and get it in
Yeah.
order. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
far, so good, right?
Seems to be working. You're on book 5.5, right?
Book 5.5, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Morning, afternoon, or evening to write?
I write in the afternoon, and that's a habit that comes out of my kids' nap times. When my kids were little, the only time I had to write was when they were sleeping, which is like right after lunch. And I'm a creature of habit. I've just kind of kept that space. It seems to work for me.
So now that your kids are grown, you can roll out of bed at noon and start writing?
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
Have my first cup of coffee at like 1 o'clock. Oh,
And then the martini. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Music, radio, or silence?
I listen to music anytime except when I'm writing. I cannot listen to anything when I'm writing. If I have music on, I just stop writing and listen to the music. It's too distracting. So got to be silent, but I love music. So listen to it a lot.
That's evident. Daily word count?
If I'm chugging away on a first draft, if I'm just like, in composing mode, I try to get about 1,000 words a day. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Very rarely I might write a little bit more than that. 1,000 is about all I can do in a day.
Mm-hmm. How long do you write for when you sit down?
Most days, 2.5, 3 hours, that's about enough. I start to peter out at that point.
Yeah, it's intense. Writing's intense. It's tough on the brain.
Yeah. It's very, very hard work. I really don't know how we do it. Seriously.
Because you're amazing, Lori.
Well, you too,
Does anyone else read your work before you send it out?
Usually, not always. Once in a while, I will just, blast something out without having a second set of eyes on it. But yeah, I usually get somebody to read it.
Mm-hmm. Did your hubby read your work? Is that a bad question?
I got him to read an early version of my first novel one time because I didn't really know any writers then. So I'm like, somebody has to read this. So I bugged him. I said, will you read this manuscript? And
The manuscript.
he finally did. And I said, so how was it? And he said, good. And that was all I said.
Nice.
I learned after that I had to get to know some other writers so I could, get some feedback.
Spare the husband, save the marriage, right?
Bingo.
Yeah, exactly. My husband only reads my stuff out only if it gets out there. If it's still sitting on my desk, it doesn't get any eyes. But yeah,
probably a wise policy, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Which author, I always find this a difficult question, has been your biggest influence on your writing?
I always find this I find this one easy because,
Do you?
I mean, if people say which writers, have influenced you, but you just say which writer, and
Mhm.
Alice Munro, I think she's kind of the beginning and the end for me always. I've read her for a long, long time and admired her work, and yeah, she's my hero.
Wow. I
Yeah,
love that. She's amazing.
she
She
is.
would be my pick as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
No wonder
You're,
we're friends.
exactly. No wonder we're working on this book together. Favorite point of view.
Anybody who's read any of my stuff knows first person. It's almost the only point of view that I use. Sometimes I try to do things in third person and it just doesn't, I don't like it. So first person, yeah.
And what do you like about first person? What is it in particular that you're
I,
drawn to?
I feel like it's the easiest way for me to get into the character. I
Hmm.
mean, if I can write with that I voice, it helps me to be that person.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and two, I mean, as a reader as well, whenever I read first person, I'm just in there right away.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it's intimate. It just draws you in, right?
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Very,
Now,
very
if
immediate.
I wonder if you might, sometimes have a reason to write in third person. If you wanted to be detached from the characters or the story for some reason, you might want to use that. But I haven't come across that situation yet, so maybe I will sometime.
That's funny. I'm not sure that I was aware of that when I was editing the collection, that it was it all first person?
It's all first person.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, well done, because you mixed it up obviously enough that I didn't even notice it was all. I
I
mean, again, I
I
was just
fooled you.
in,
I
right?
fooled you.
You fooled me, Laura. You totally did. All right. Do you believe in writer's block, and what do you do if it strikes?
I do. I mean, sometimes I think that writer's block is related to maybe what's going on in your life, if you're stressed or, if you're overworked or something. But yeah, I mean, I have had that experience myself. And if it does strike, I take a break, just take the pressure off and try to do something else for a while. And that usually helps. Or free falling, do a little free falling, and that can kind of get the juices flowing. If you really find that you're stuck and you just don't know what to write about, free falling always seems to be a way back into it for me.
Yeah, nice, nice. I like that you said take a break, because writers are never allowed to do that. We're supposed to be like chained to our computers and
Yeah.
writing every day.
Well, like
It.
you and I are, right? Like
Oh,
all the time.
always, just yeah, yeah, and we're just rolling in the J.K. Rowling dough, right?
We sure are.
Okay, last question: cat or dog?
Well, just like with the novel versus short story question, both. I have both. I love them both. I can't decide. So both.
And you don't have to. You don't have to. All right. Now, well, we've been quick rounding here. We've got a few more comments and questions, and I'll read those out and then we'll start to wrap it up. Heidi Klassen says, Vermin is this month's AB Lit Book Club book.
No way.
Woo-hoo! I did
No
not know
way.
that.
Cool.
Congratulations.
I
Did
didn't
you know that?
I didn't know that. No one tells
Wow.
authors anything. That's
No,
good though. Thank you.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Heidi, for pointing that out. You'll have to go look for that, Lori.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, for sure. That's excellent. Barb Howard says, great job, Lori and Lee. Super book, and glad you are still coffee friends after the editing process.
We are too, Barb. We are too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Lori and I were laughing about that before we started. I'm like, I'm so glad you're still speaking to me.
And I felt the same way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Betty Jane Haggart says, a great book for a book club discussion. And this is a great discussion. Thanks, Lori and Lee.
Oh, thank you, Betty.
This would have to be the last question, she says. Lori Roadhouse Haney says, do you rely more heavily on imagination or research, knowing that both are necessary? Oh, good question, Lori.
It kind of depends on the story. I mean, I think clearly the historical stories have a fairly significant research component to them. But in order for it to be a historical story and not just a historical anecdote, I mean, the imagination has to be engaged. So I think with each individual story, you could probably sit down and figure out, okay, like it's 38%, research and some other number that I can't do in my head, imagination. I think it's different from story to story, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but they're both very useful in writing stories.
So I have a question just further to that. Do you, when you're thinking of, I know that this novel that you're working on now is historical fiction.
Yes.
Do you do the research first and then you start the writing, or do you begin the writing and then start to delve into the research that you need in order to pull it?
Well, the novel I'm working on is based on the life of Clara Schumann, who was a 19th century composer, pianist, and performer in Germany. And I haven't really written a straight historical novel before. And what I found was that I did research for a year, and then I started writing the first draft. And I finished the first draft just this summer. And now I think I'm going to have to do some more research. So like this could go on forever, really. At some point I'm going to have to just say, I've done enough research. But when you're writing a novel based on somebody's life, there's a lot of information you have to gather, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm taking turns. I'm like doing research and then writing a draft and then doing some more research and writing a draft, and maybe I don't know, who knows what'll happen after that.
Well,
More
I
research.
know that part of your research for that book, that your trip to Germany is on hold because that's part of your research that you got a grant for. And
Yes.
I'm crossing my fingers that you will get to go to Germany at some point so that you can live and breathe it, right?
Thank you. I was supposed to go in May, and then yeah, we're hoping sometime next year, maybe the year after. Who knows?
Can't you
I just
drive? If you drive, then you don't have to quarantine, right? Because if you don't fly,
Hey, that's a good idea. It wouldn't take very long to drive over the ocean. Good idea.
exactly. Yeah.
It'll
All
happen.
right. All right. Well, thank you. Well, again, thank you everybody for coming out.
Yes, thank you very much. Much
Yeah,
appreciated.
that's awesome. We can all wave goodbye to each other, even though you can't see us. Everybody wave goodbye just to feel good about it, right?
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, Lori. Thank you everybody for coming out, and thank you for your questions and your comments. It's nice. We can't see you, but we know you're there, and we appreciate it. Thank you,
Thanks,
Jason,
everyone.
for being our host.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.